Hello and welcome to Networking with NIFA. My name is John Turner and I'm the Manager of Community Development Research at the Nebraska Investment Finance Authority. And also joining me from NIFA in the background, monitoring the chat and the questions, is Susan Pullis, Outreach and Community Development Administrator. We are very excited today to have Bridget Thompson with us. Bridget is a licensed independent mental health practitioner. She has over 20 years of experience in the human services field. Her passion for helping people reach their full potential matches her dynamic professional expertise. Her work in both the mental health field as well as physical health field has helped Bridget bring the two industries together to deliver comprehensive care. She completed her bachelor's degree in psychology from the University of Nebraska in Lincoln. She later graduated with her master's of arts in counseling from Doane College and then earned her health coach certificate through the American Council on Exercise. Professionally, Bridget enjoys providing counseling services to youth and adults throughout Lincoln and enjoys her involvement with the Lincoln Homeless Coalition. She is an energetic trainer and presenter that believes in enhancing professional skills, personal goals, and improving interpersonal dynamics. Please use our question feature during the presentation, and we will ask them after Bridget's presentation. With that, I will turn it over to Bridget.
Hi, thank you so much, John, and welcome everybody. I'm excited to be here today. I was looking through some of NIFA's previous things. Hold on just a sec. I'm going to make sure that I'm on screen share. Can you see my screen today? Okay, I cannot, so I'm going to X out of this. There we go. I'm going to go back to that. I'll just keep it on there. I was flipping through some of NIFA's previous presentations to the community, and I realized, our community faces a lot of heavy topics out there that NIFA has been a part of helping address and grow. And as I was thinking about that, I thought, this one's going to be a lot different for people. The other ones are more about what maybe your agency can do or how you can help the community. And today's lens is going to take the lens of outward community and flip it and hopefully focus more on you, because each one of you is an important part of what makes Lincoln such a special community. We are known for our collaboration. We are known for pulling together and making things work. But we can't do that if you're not whole. We can't do that as a community if you aren't taking care of you. And so is what I found, especially in 2020, is the burnout that's happening, Zoom fatigue. Oh my gosh, is anyone else's eyeballs just ready to fall out of their head by noon? Zoom fatigue is a real thing. We're all tired. We're all doing things very, very differently. And so I hope today gives you some inspiration to look at how you're really doing right now, and also gives you some inspiration to take care of yourself, because without you as an individual, Lincoln wouldn't be the amazing community that it is. So I love what Susan said to me a few days ago. In the event of an emergency, please put on your oxygen mask before assisting others. If you've been on a plane ever, you've heard that. And that's exactly what today is about, is you taking care of you. And the other little picture that you see is just one of my favorite puns. And it was my favorite pun well before 2020, but it's definitely fits this year, which is, these are difficult times. And if you're not a musician, it's okay. Try to do the math on that. Just figure it into a fraction, and it's really, really difficult. So these are difficult times we are living in, and we all need to learn how to take care of ourselves, perhaps in a different way. So today's objective, and there we go. Today's objectives are, I would like for you to be able to increase your knowledge of what burnout looks like, what the risk factors are, what the risk groups are, and what are some signs and symptoms. I'd like to be able for you to increase your ability to recognize when it's happening to you, but also when it's happening to others. I think it's a great gift we can give others when we can, in a kind and loving way, say to somebody, are you okay? How are you today? And not just as the greeting that we typically do here in the Midwest, but an actual genuine, how's COVID been treating you? How's 2020 been treating you? And then help them to address maybe some things that aren't going so well in their lives. And one of my favorite things, anyone that's met me knows that I'm very solution focused. So I'm going to provide some actual solutions, which are going to come in the way of boundary setting and some self-care strategies. And one of my other favorite things about providing solutions is almost all of my solutions are free. How great is that? So let's talk about high-risk groups. I've done this presentation quite a few times. I did it years ago and have done it for many years. And high-risk groups has changed a little bit in the past 12 months. And I'll go over that in just a second. But high-risk groups for burnout typically include any kind of caretaker. A caretaker can be someone that is going to a job and is taking care of people, whether it's direct staff, whether it's front office staff, whether it's a bank teller. If you're, yes, I do include bank tellers in that because they are taking care of people in a way, they're taking care of our finances. Or maybe you're going to a job that is, pretty much pen and paper, but you're coming home and you're taking care of people, whether that's a family member that you're taking care of, whether it's maybe an aging parent. That population is growing very, very quickly with our aging parents and taking care of them, whether it's a pet that you have and perhaps your pet is sick. So there's all sorts of caretaking that fits into that category. It's not maybe the traditional caretaker that we think of. Another high-risk group is a direct service provider, and that direct service provider can be a manager, a coordinator, office staff, street outreach, office outreach, pretty much anyone that is on the phone with the general public or with other people is at high risk for burnout. Social workers, human service providers, emergency responders, that kind of goes without saying that they are high-risk groups. The next couple got added for this year, and that's students and other learning communities. With this year, students and learning communities, they're at risk for burnout anyway, just because of, they're just ingesting so much information all day long. Well, on top of that, now they're managing ingesting information, trying to do things via technology, trying to do things remotely, still trying to get, performance on grades and things like that. And it's really turned into a high-risk group. And I also added anyone alive during 2020. If you are alive during the year 2020, you're at high risk for burnout. One thing that I'll talk about later on that you'll probably catch on to pretty quickly is I use my sense of humor to present, and I also use it to cope with things. But as I got to thinking, I thought, gosh, if anyone is doing anything in 2020, we're probably at high risk to burnout, for sure. But then there's also some environmental factors, and the environmental factors, oh no, sorry, I'm trying to move that. Is there a way to go back? Well, I'll just talk about the environmental factors. Sorry, you will get these slides so you can look at them. Environmental factors include having poor management or having poor leadership. If you're in a high stress situation and you have poor leadership, then it's going to be, your risk for burnout is going to be higher. If you are experiencing multiple changes and the changes are coming at you and you're not sure why they're happening or you don't have a say in them, that's going to lead to quicker burnout. Not having enough breaks. Some of these are really simple kind of no-brainers for, of course, these are environmental factors that could lead to burnout. Breaks, going from one task to another task very quickly and not being able to have what's called a transition period leads to burnout. On the flip side of that, having a task that you're doing over and over and over again also can lead to burnout. And then there's other basic things like not enough sleep, not taking care of your physical environment, not getting enough nutrition. Those can all lead to burnout much quicker than if those things were in place. And the slide that we're on now, because I accidentally slipped over the environmental slide, is the I'm just tired and other red flags. The I'm just tired. That's, I think, a thing we all say to ourselves when we're approaching burnout, but maybe we haven't recognized it. We think, oh, I'm just tired. Oh, I didn't sleep enough. Or, oh, I haven't been getting my regular workouts in, or I haven't been able to talk to this person like I usually have. We tend to code it as something that's just an everyday experience when it can actually be a red flag. So on this slide, it's things that you'll probably see a decrease in or an increase in as you're experiencing burnout. So if you're getting close to burnout, the other thing I'd like to say here is that in some situations it's called burnout, in some situations it's called compassion fatigue, caretaker fatigue, Zoom fatigue, any kind of fatigue with a word in front of it. But for today's presentation, we're just going to use the word burnout. So if you're nearing burnout, you're going to notice that there's a decrease of concentration. And this will be maybe that sensation that I'm trying really hard to pay attention, but my thoughts are all over the place. Or next thing you know, you've been doing a task for a while and you don't know how you got to that certain part of the task. So your concentration is much less. Unfortunately, our empathy decreases with burnout as well. Empathy is that place where we can go, oh, I may not be experiencing what you're experiencing, but I can understand how you're feeling in that. And once our burnout gets higher and higher and higher, our empathy gets lower and lower and lower. So we just don't have a tolerance for other people's situations. Another thing that decreases is not the word no, but just the opposite of that. When we're approaching burnout, we might notice that our ability to tell people no decreases, meaning I feel so much pressure to get all of these things done. I can't tell people no. I can't tell this person no. I can't say no to this task. I can't say no to shutting off my phone or putting my laptop down, which would mean yes to more sleep. I can't say no. If you find yourself with a lot on your plate and you're not being able to say no, then my guess is that you're approaching burnout. Some other things that happen is maybe one of the first things we might notice is an increase of irritability. And that's irritability across the board. Especially when I'm seeing people in private sessions, I'm hearing a lot of, this person that I used to be very close to is now just irritating me, or this thing over here that never used to bother me before is now irritating me, whether it could be something as small as maybe a cupboard door that doesn't function correctly. Now every time you go to that cupboard door, it's misfunctioning and you're just at the end of your rope. So that's an increase of irritability. Along with the decreases of concentration and the decreased ability to say no is an increase in our mistakes, which is very frustrating, I think, for a lot of people. When we start making mistakes maybe we didn't even catch, whether it's an email, whether it's I forgot to do this part 1 of a task or part 4 of a task, and I know how to do this task, but I forgot to do it, or I forgot to contact this person, I forgot to follow through, I forgot to write this down. All of those things lead to mistakes. And especially if all the other things are happening and burnout is approaching, you add a mistake in there, and my guess is that your frustration with yourself, it just boils over. Definitely in 2020, I've seen an increase of the next one. I think most people have seen an increase of the next one, which is negative coping strategies. People want a direct list of what's a negative coping strategy. I'll go through some more of the obvious ones, but I will say this, any coping strategy can turn negative. If your coping strategy is reading, that's usually a good thing. However, if you're reading till 4 in the morning and not falling asleep and then getting up and you're very tired the next day and you're not aces at work anymore, that just became a negative coping strategy. If your coping strategy is to do puzzles, and that usually feels very good to you. If you're using that puzzle in order to escape the entire rest of the world and you're not getting other things done around the house, or again, you're not able to go to sleep at night, then that just became a negative coping strategy. I think this year has really put a spotlight on our negative coping strategies, including whether it's overeating, over drinking, undersleeping, not being able to spend adequate times doing things that make us relieve our stress. Some people are overworking out, some people are underworking out. So whichever it is, the negative coping strategies have definitely increased this year. You'll also might see an increase of just general fatigue. Fatigue is a little bit different than being tired. Being tired is, well, maybe I didn't sleep good, or maybe I am restless. Fatigue is that body sensation where I liken it to having feeling like your body's full of sand or concrete if you're quite fatigued. Fatigue is from your head to your toes. It's just a blah feeling of I can't quite muster the energy to do a whole lot. And of course, the flip side of that is an increase of anxiety. Anxiety is that feeling of rush, 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 but also I can't stop these thoughts from occurring. Maybe you're having intrusive thoughts. Maybe you're having the same thought over and over. Maybe a thought you're having is really scary and it's making your heart race, which I know for a lot of people can lead to full-blown panic attacks or even mini panic attacks. So anxiety is definitely on the increase if you are approaching burnout. And of course, then I should stop saying of course. The other thing that is a red flag for burnout is just having a restless kind of sleep. Some people oversleep when they're approaching burnout and some people undersleep. Doesn't matter which one you do, either way, you're not getting restful sleep. If you're oversleeping, then the sleep tends to be very restless and not the quality sleep that we need. If you're undersleeping, then you're not getting that really deep REM sleep that our brains need every single day to heal and do that. So now that we've talked about the red flags, I'm going to take you on another little journey of stress. This is going to feel a little bit like what I call a bird walk. And a bird walk is when you talk about something else, but it does come back full circle. So in talking about all those red flags, they all had something in common, and that is that they're likely stress-induced. Burnout comes from when we have too much stress in our lives. So I'm going to give you a little bit of a biological background of what stress is, what happens to our body when stress enters it, and why it can be such a big deal. And that's what the next 3 slides are about. So stress in and of itself is actually just a root word. Our world today actually is talking about the physical sensation of feeling distressed. But since we all use the word stress, I'm just going to use the word stress for today too. But essentially, stress in and of itself isn't that bad of a thing. It's just a physical response to a stimuli. When that physical response happens, it actually activates our fight or flight at the base of our brain, clear back here. And that fight or flight response is meant to protect us. It's meant to keep us alive. That fight or flight response has existed in our brains for thousands and thousands of years. That fight or flight response has absolutely no idea that we're living in the world 2020 with all of the things that are going on. So the response that we have when that fight or flight or flee or freeze response is activated is the same exact response that was in existence in our brains 5,000 years ago. And so it hasn't quite caught up for today. The same chemicals are being released, the same exact thing is happening, but it's having a different impact on our bodies today. So there's some of the chemicals in that chemical batch that's released, the adrenaline, the cortisol, the norepinephrine, and that kind of thing. So for now, I want you to take your concentration and put it on what I see as the left side of the screen. So the left side of the screen is the more linear staircase type progression of things. We're going to hit on the other one in just a moment. So typically how stress works is it starts at the top. Danger presents itself, chemicals are released. The chemicals are to make us fight, flight, freeze. There's some other, people call it different things, but that's the most common one. Each of those chemicals has a job that it does in our bodies. One of the chemicals goes to our eyes and closes down our periphery. One of the chemicals goes to our throat and makes, this one's pretty fascinating to me, constricts our vocal cords, so that way we talk higher pitch, because higher pitches travel farther, and so more people can hear us calling for help. Other chemicals go to our heart, makes our heart beat faster, makes our lungs breathe quicker, makes our, goes to our digestive system, shuts down our digestive system, shuts down. So in some instances, one chemical will make one system work better. Another chemical will go to another system and slow it down. And all of these things have consequences. One chemical goes to our veins and shuts down the little teeny tiny capillaries that we don't really need, because the blood needs to go to our bigger group muscles. And I'll talk about what a consequence of that is later. So essentially, these chemicals are released. And these chemicals are a lot like, I kind of liken it to eating a sandwich. So these chemicals are released just like a sandwich in our stomach needs to be digested. These chemicals get digested as well. They get metabolized by our body. And some chemicals metabolize over the course of 5 minutes. Some metabolize over the course of several hours. It just depends on the chemical and honestly what you're doing. So these chemicals tell us to do something. Now let's go back in time a couple thousand years ago. If these chemicals were being released, our bodies were in danger, so we would do one of those things. Hopefully we would either fight or flee. It's not good for us to freeze. That's usually where things go bad. So most humans are going to do one of those two things. And we're going to do that, and we're going to fight or we're going to flee. Again, hopefully not freeze. And eventually the danger will pass. As that danger passes, our bodies return to what's called homeostasis. Homeostasis is a state of existence where there's no danger and the chemicals have been digested or metabolized out of our bodies. Now, that's in an ideal situation. Let's talk about what's really going on in today's world. So let's hop over to what's on the right side of the screen, which is the cycle. And I'm going to start at the top and I'm going to go clockwise. So danger presents itself. And over here, I also put stress because our bodies don't know the difference between danger and stress. So if you're at work and you're feeling very overwhelmed and you get another task to complete, your body senses stress, and it's the exact same chemical batch that's being released as if you're being chased by a bear. Same exact chemical response. So the danger has become stress. The stress has become danger in our brains. So stress presents itself. The exact same chemicals are released. However, what are most of us doing throughout the day? Most of us aren't, trained athletes that are practicing. Most of us are either sitting. A lot of us are sitting a lot more this year. A lot of us are sitting. A lot of us are working, or we're doing tasks that don't require a lot of actual physical exertion. So there's no option to run. There's no option to fight. And as what happens in our world is that we don't have time for that first chemical batch to metabolize before the next danger or stress presents itself. So we're getting danger, chemicals are released, no option to run. Danger, chemicals are released, no option to run. Stress, no option to run. Stress. And all of that does, it just compounds in us. So that's why, especially in 2020, I hate to keep bringing that up, but this has just been a traumatic year, I think, for so many people, is that those chemicals stack up one on top of each other. And when they don't metabolize, we get consequences. And these are the consequences. We get physical aches and pains. Those chemicals can sit in our joints. Those chemicals cause a lot of digestion issues, inflammation issues, definitely mess with our sleep cycle, right? That goes back to that less sleep, or if you do get more sleep, it's restless sleep. An increase or decrease of appetite, that's when we see people having either nutritional problems one way or the other, because if your appetite decreases, you can have some nutritional consequences. If your appetite increases, what kind of foods are you usually going for? We're not going, gosh, I am so stressed out, I'm going to go eat a head of lettuce and an apple. I wish it worked that way. No, typically when your appetite increases, you're wanting the sweets, you're wanting calorie dense foods, you want rich foods, you want something that's going to make you feel better. And we'll talk about that too later on when we're talking about self-care. The side effects of those stress chemicals not being metabolized or just loading up on us, a lot of headaches, migraines. Anyone that experiences migraines will tell you they're almost always linked to either food consumption or stress, one of the two. Impacts on our organ functioning. If we have, just like if you were to consume a lot of a substance, whether it's ibuprofen or alcohol or anything like that that needs to be metabolized, it's going to impact your organ functioning, as does this. Stress is directly related to heart disease because of that chemical that's being pushed out to make your heart beat harder and faster, as if you're being chased by a bear, but you're not, you're sitting. And so your heart is working harder, but almost for no reason. I already mentioned the increased inflammation issues and disease, and I already said that about the increased heart disease. And let's not forget the psychological effects. If you have too much stress, it's going to come across as anger and irritability. because a lot of those chemicals, they include testosterone, adrenaline, and chemicals like that that aren't the happy feel-good chemicals in our bodies. They're the get it done kind of chemicals. And if you have a lot of that in you, it's hard to feel nice and relaxed when that's going on. Lack of concentration, because you have that adrenaline coming at your brain constantly, and your brain's then going to constantly be looking for something to worry about. And if you're constantly looking for something to worry about, then you get this sense of generalized fear, generalized anxiety, catastrophizing, which is I feel like something bad's going to happen even when nothing bad is going to happen, or maybe something small is going on, but it feels very big. And all of these psychological consequences are going to lead to mental fatigue, mental and of course physical fatigue as well. So that's the bad stuff. I don't like to stay on that stuff very long. There's no way for me to actually do those slides without making you slightly stressed out, which I know that, and it makes me feel a little bad, but I had to give you that information so that way we can get to the good stuff, which is how do we take care of ourselves when we're approaching burnout? What do we do? How can we make the time or make a plan when things seem just so overwhelming? And time again, these two main things are what I call the antidote to burnout or compassion fatigue, whichever you'd like to call it. And that's self-care and setting boundaries. Things that people know but don't always make it a priority to do. So I'm going to start with self-care. There are many dimensions to wellness and to self-care. I'm going to focus on these three today. Some models call the 7 dimensions of wellness, some call it the 8 dimensions of wellness. In all honesty, I could spend an hour on each one of these and have done many presentations about each of these by themselves and some together. So that's what I like about making sure that you get the slides is I'm going to do a pretty brief overview of each of these, but you have the slides and then you can further investigate what's best for you. One of the most popular questions I get later on after I do these slides is that sounded like a really good idea, Bridget. I have no idea where to start. And I always say, out of these 6 categories, there's going to be one category that you're already doing. And it just varies per person. I can't tell which, like who does what, but you're going to know, oh, I already pretty much do that one. So you can start there, but I'd like for you to start with the next one and just start with one piece. Oftentimes we get ideas, we get jazzed, we're like, yeah, I really want to do this self-care thing. And then we try to eat the whole elephant all at once. And how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. So start small, see if that's a good fit for you, make it habitual, and then move on to the next thing rather than try 5 or 6 things all at once. So regarding self-care, a lot of people think, oh yeah, self-care, I know what that is. But probably what you're thinking of is more in line with one area and not necessarily the whole gamut. So one area of self-care is physical self-care. Physical self-care is minding your sleep. I am such a sleep inflictor where I'm constantly talking to people about their sleep. I'm begging people to sleep more or get more quality sleep. Put your phones down, put your screens down, do what you need, just make sleep sacred to you. I think sleep is such a beautiful healing thing. Our bodies need it, our minds need it. It's a great excuse to take some time out. But if you found that you're sleeping more and that's your kind of go-to thing and it's become a negative coping mechanism for you, then I don't want you sleeping as much. So I will say that, but most of us actually need to sleep more, not less. And there's some tricks that you can do to get better sleep. You can put your phones down, you can set timers. Some people can't add 15 minutes to the end of their sleep, which would mean sleeping in 15 minutes. So I'm asking people, then try adding 15 minutes to the beginning of your sleep pattern. When you get up in the middle of the night, please don't look at your phone. I know a lot of you use those as your alarm clocks. That light that comes from a screen mimics the same light that comes from the sun to our brains, and it tells us wake up. And so that's why we might be up for some time in the middle of the night if we're looking at lights and things like that. So that's a really important element of self-care. Another element of self-care is nutrition. What are you putting in your mouth? We tend to know what healthy foods are and what unhealthy foods are. And people then get really down on themselves. They're like, oh, I'm not eating healthy enough. And I'm saying, just swap one thing. Just sneak in a veggie when you can. You don't need to make a drastic change. You don't need to change your entire, you don't need to go from being carnivorous to being completely vegan. That would be, your body wouldn't like that, first of all. And second of all, that's too much. But you can do it in little chunks, swapping out one meal a day, or like I said, just sneaking in some spinach and something. So how you are eating, gosh, is what I've seen a lot more this year than I have previous years, are people are cyclically eating, meaning that they're not eating for really long periods of time and not on purpose like some people do regarding that eating pattern, but they're not eating all day and then they're eating high calorie like dinners at night and then not eating again for another 20 hours or so. And that can be really hard on a body. So eating every few hours is what's best for you, knowing what's best for you, knowing what diet works for you. These diets that are out there these days, yeah, they make money, they make people skinny, I think, things like that, but that doesn't mean it's good for your body. And what I mean for your body is literally your body. What works for me isn't going to work for you necessarily. So it's figuring out what your nutrition is, because it's not a one size fits all kind of thing for sure. Big piece of physical self-care is movement. Notice I didn't put exercise on there. Ew, I don't say that word. Most people don't like that word. So instead of exercise, I use the word movement, because literally anything can count for movement. And getting your body moving is a great way to do self-care. Tell yourself that you are important enough to get up and move a little bit. I know it's harder when it's 20 degrees outside, but let's face it, it's hard when it's 100 degrees outside too. So finding what works for you, even if it's stretching. Sometimes I'm talking to people about, well, how do you get your mail during the day? Oh, you have to get up, you have to get on your feet, you have to physically go get the mail, right? All right, well, let's start there and let's move from there. Let's walk to and from the mailbox twice tomorrow instead of just once. Another part of physical care that a lot of people haven't paid attention to prior to 2020 is their medical care. Medical care includes, are you keeping up on whatever your annual or biannual checkups are? Are you keeping up on your teeth? Are you keeping up on your physical self-care, your hygiene? Are you getting up and showering when you need to? Those things all can kind of go into the medical thing of keeping yourself the best functioning you can. We are but organic creatures, and we need to take care of this organic creature, or we'll see some consequences, like on this couple slides before. And then there's emotional self-care. I think when people hear emotional self-care, or when people hear self-care, they think of emotional self-care. That kind of goes into these two categories of, oh yeah, I do that. But if you're not very good at emotional self-care, here's some things you can do in order to start. And one of, I think, the best things you can do to take care of yourself emotionally is that first one right on there, and that's ask for help. For whatever reason, we've been, I don't know if it's a Midwest thing or who knows, if it's an American trait, it might be global, but we've got something going on with us where it's like, I can't ask for help, or if I ask for help, I'm weak, or I look stupid, or whatever that strange self-talk is when we need to ask for help and we don't. But actually asking for help shows some incredible insight. It shows that you are smart enough to know when you need help, and knowing who to rely on for that help, building up a social network, which I'll talk about later, is really important. If you're feeling overwhelmed, please ask for help. If you're getting 50 emails a day and you can't handle it, ask for help. Which kind of goes into the next one, which is knowing your time management. Time management is a way to care for us emotionally, because if we set out to do too much at once, we're not taking care of ourselves emotionally. That's when we feel overwhelmed. That's when burnout happens. And so knowing, if I am going to get 50 emails in a day and I can't get to them all, what's a way I can strategize to get a big chunk of them done at least? Do I need to shut my phone off? Do I need to seclude myself and just focus on nothing but those emails? It's really learning what time management organizational way works best for you. Another way to take care of yourself emotionally is know what your boundaries are. Know what your boundaries are and maintain those boundaries, which usually means having to let other people know in a kind, loving way what your boundaries are. Trust me, I do like 3 slides on that later. And another way to do emotional self-care, hobbies. I laugh because again, when I did this presentation, back in 2019, 2018, I was silly talking about hobbies, but now in 2020, everyone's like, no, really, we all need hobbies, and we've all, I think, learned and understand how important our hobbies are to taking care of our well-being. And then there's the concept of spiritual self-care. Spiritual self-care is not necessarily attending an organized religious gathering. It certainly can for you, but that's definitely not the extent of it. It's so much bigger than that. Spiritual self-care is more like feeling a connection or a purpose to something greater than yourself. And that can include mindfulness. Mindfulness is the appreciation of the here and now, and it's not what can you do for me or what can I do for you, but how we can all be existing right in this very moment. Spiritual self-care, praying and meditating. Spiritual self-care is not on there, but it can also be reading books that are pleasing to you or that help you find purpose or make you feel more connected to humans in general. Then another group is intellectual self-care. We don't think about this, but a lot of people need to be fed in a way that their intellectual self-care is very strong. And that can be through reading, and people that enjoy doing intellectual self-care tend to read about things that they find stimulating. So maybe it's a fictional book, or maybe it's a nonfiction book. Another way to take care of your intellectual needs is to do brain games. Brain games they can do, here's what I'm saying, go ahead and pick up your phone now, go ahead and pick up your screen. There used to be old-fashioned brain games like dominoes and rummy and solitaire. Remember those? And those were all you needed to do math on them, you needed to do matching, there was some strategy. Of course, chess is a brain game. Candyland is a pretty basic brain game, but you're matching, again, the colors to things. So any kind of brain game is feeding your intellectual needs. And then another way to match or to get your intellectual needs met is to take a course or a training. Now, of course, this would probably have to be online, but it could be anything regarding something maybe you're more curious about, whether it could be knitting, it could be accounting, it could be how to operate or how to write code. It doesn't have to be necessarily something tied to a hobby you have. It could just be taking a course to better yourself, or it could be adult dancing. It could be a lot of things, but learning something new, taking a course or taking a training is often very intellectually satisfying for a lot of people. Alrighty, 2 more to go on self-care. Oh, I must say that probably taking a course or online training might be one of the only ones, or one of the few that probably might cost some money of the things. Remember how I promised that most of my recommendations or suggestions are free? Most of them are, but not all of them. So social self-care. How do we take care of ourselves socially? This has become kind of tricky, hasn't it? You bet it has. One way to do that, though, is to find a similar interest group. A similar interest group can look like anything. It can be a Facebook group. Here's where wives don't like what I'm about to say. That was a little sexist because I also have a fantasy football team. However, fantasy football teams go under similar interest groups. It's actually quite socially satisfying to belong to that. Even though it might drive some people crazy, that's a pretty healthy one that makes people feel very centered around each other. So, but it doesn't necessarily have to be that formal. It can be something very informal. It can be a book club. Book clubs are similar interest groups. Like I said before, Facebook groups, or anytime you belong to something outside of just yourself, is a similar interest group. And if you're looking to increase your social self-care, that's a really good way to do it, because it can be hands-off or it can be very involved. And so if you find yourself to be a little more socially shy, then you can do a little bit more of a hands-off group. Or if you find yourself very socially involved, you can just dive right in and go to a group that meets a lot and that's very together. Another way to do social self-care, one thing that I do like people to know when it comes to social self-care, is that it doesn't have to be reciprocal necessarily. A lot of people think, oh, well, if I'm going to be social, it has to be I give, you give, I give, where that's not accurate. It can actually be just you giving, and that's where acts of kindness are so fulfilling to so many people because it connects us to our community, it connects us to our other social people, and it doesn't have to be rewarded or recognized. You can just go do it and it will feel good to you. And that's very similar to volunteering, where when we volunteer, we're making ourselves a part of a bigger social network, whether it's volunteering hands-on, like with animals or people, or whether it's hands-off, stacking food at the food bank or loading trucks at the food bank. Gives us that sense of belonging. And that's really what we're looking for when it comes to social connectedness. How do you feel like you belong? And if you find yourself saying, gosh, I don't feel like I belong anywhere, then this might be one of the places where you might want to start to explore what your social self-care might look like. And with all of that being said, I love social media in some ways, but I am cautioning against it a lot more and more. Social media does not equal social self-care. In fact, it can damage our social self-care depending on what we're putting in our brains. You know, we talk a lot about, when we talk about self-care, what we're putting in our mouths, like how much water are you drinking, what's your nutrition, but I think it's high time we start talking about what we put in our brains, what we put through our eyeballs, what we put through our ears, what podcasts are we listening to, what social media are we putting in our brains, because that kind of nutrition, social nutrition or positive messages, is just as important as putting good foods into our bodies. A lot of us have noticed this over this past year, or at least I know I've noticed a big increase when talking to people in individual sessions, that the social media has really had a damaging impact on people's just, well, increases their burnout for sure, and it's having a negative impact on their thoughts and beliefs about themselves, which is really unfortunate. So limiting your social media, or just being aware of what you're putting in your ears and your eyes, and how that's just as important as the nutrition that you put in your body. And the last thing, well, not last, but the final thing on this is the occupational self-care. What does that mean? Believe it or not, what you do for a living, how you spend your days, all 8 hours of them, is really important. And you can tie your occupational self with your self-care. And that is, even if you're in a job that you're not enjoying right now, it doesn't mean you can't be occupationally moving towards something better. So what are your short-term goals? What are your long-term goals? And if you haven't sat down, I highly encourage you to sit down and write out your 1-year goals, your 3-year goals, your 5-year goals. Depending on where you're at in your life, you can certainly do 10-year goals and 20-year goals. I think sometimes, because life is so unpredictable, it's a little tough to go beyond 10 or 20, unless it's to like, oh, I want my house paid off by then, or oh, I would like this paid off by then. But the short-term goal is literally like, I want to finish this degree, or I want to be at this place, and then writing out little steps that you can take and little ways that you know that you're going to meet that goal is very fulfilling. A lot of people have just made their hobbies their side gigs. If you're a crafter, if you're a musician, if you're a tarot card reader, whatever, you can be as creative as you want. Make your hobby a side gig. That can be very fulfilling when it comes to meeting that occupational self-care. And just sitting down with yourself and asking yourself, what is my purpose when it comes to my occupation? Even if you're not currently doing it, what is it that's going to fill my cup? We spend 1/3 to 1/4 of our lives at work. 1/3 to 1/4 of our entire lives. Isn't that something? It makes me terribly sad when people talk about how unhappy they are at their jobs, because one, it's one of the most controllable things that you can do, and two, it's where you spend a lot of your life. So it's important to feel fulfilled, or to feel inclusive when it comes to work. And even though you're not there now, it doesn't mean you can't make a plan to feel fulfilled in the long run. Last but not least, boundaries. Everyone's so scared of setting boundaries, right? So I'll try to break it down in a way that's not quite so scary. I do believe that boundaries is the antidote to burnout, though. And why do I think that? Because if you're approaching burnout and you have good boundaries, you're able to say, I can't do this right now, or I need your help, or I'm not going to do this until this gets done. Those are boundaries. I'm going to walk us through each one of these different kinds of boundaries: social boundaries, emotional boundaries, and physical boundaries. And hopefully give you some inspiration on if you want to improve one area over the other. And again, I could do a whole hour presentation on just boundaries alone. So I do go through these somewhat quickly. I do welcome, the very last slide has my email. So I do welcome any kind of questions if you're thinking about this over the next couple of days, like, hey, I want more information about this, or what did you mean when you said that? Or you went over that too quickly. Please reach out to me. I'm happy to answer any questions. So physical boundaries are what you are willing to do and to not do. And most people think of physical boundaries. I'm a hugger. So COVID's been really hard on me. I'm a hugger, and so I have to know when that's appropriate to do, when it's not appropriate to do. Not everybody's likes to have their personal bubble invaded, and so people think of physical boundaries, that's what comes to mind, but it's so much bigger than that. It's so much bigger than my proximity to another human being. Physical boundaries include routine, and we've learned a lot about our routine and about our transition times over the past year or so. Routine is so important. What you do in the morning to take care of yourself, what you do at night to take care of yourself, what you do in the middle of the day to take care of yourself. I have a routine, I'm just making this up right now, but let's say that you have a routine and every day at between 11 and noon, you go for a walk. That would be a physical boundary for you. It doesn't sound like it would be, but it would be a routine that leads to self-care, and it also leads to letting other people know I'm not available during that time because I'm doing this, and it's okay to do that. Physical boundaries are also how you keep your space, and including if you like your space a little more tidy, if you like your space a little more filled with items, that makes some people feel safe. Some people like their space very cleared out. It's also what you do. Remember back when we all had offices, or at least we had, maybe not offices, but maybe your car is your office, and people would enter your cubicle, and people would enter into your cubicle, and there's things in there that they can touch and that they can't touch. And that's okay. That's a physical boundary that you have. Physical boundaries protect you and allow you to let other people know what's best for you. Down there I have like taking breaks, of course, and then I have people reduction. What does that mean? People reduction is not everyone can tolerate being around a lot of people at once. So some people, I can only talk to 2 or 3 people a day and then I'm done. Other people I can talk to 50 people a day and I'm still getting going. So it's knowing what's for you. And that's kind of like the introvert versus the extrovert in some ways, but it's just knowing what works for you and what doesn't work for you and letting other people know. If it doesn't work for you to be around big crowds of people and be having to talk to 50 people in a day, then going to a big conference and having to network during that conference, it might not be for you. And you might need to have a discussion with a supervisor about how I'm not the best person for that job. If you want results, then maybe this other person might be a better fit for that. That's a physical boundary. Emotional boundaries. Emotional boundaries, I think, are the most difficult ones because we often don't know that our emotional boundaries get crossed until they get crossed. And then we leave these situations feeling awkward, or we leave these situations feeling bad. Or maybe I shouldn't have said that, or I wish that person wouldn't have said that to me, that really hurt my feelings, or I don't want to be around that person anymore. So in those reflections, if you're having those reflections, then my guess is that an emotional boundary was crossed. And if your emotional boundaries continue to get crossed, you're going to experience burnout. You're not going to want to go to work. You're not going to want to complete your tasks because you're emotionally burnt out. So emotional boundaries are what you are willing and are not willing to feel and tolerate. There are going to be certain things that you don't mind talking about that don't bother you at all. Then there's going to be other topics that I call are off limits. And it's up to you to know what those are. And it's also up to you to be able to kindly and effectively express that to other people. Especially around the holidays when people are asking about, oh, what's your family tradition? You might not feel comfortable talking about your family. And it's okay to have a canned response that says, my family's really personal to me and I'm not comfortable talking about it, but I'd love to hear about yours, is a way you can kind of distract and divert. So communication is really the key to emotional boundaries, and I do believe that we can say just about anything with dignity and kindness in a way that gets it across to the other person without being harmful to anyone else. The other thing about emotional boundaries is knowing what your personal triggers are. If something is triggering to you, then it's how am I going to handle that? I know it's going to come up at work because we can't always avoid every trigger ever. That I don't know how any human being would do that. So triggers are going to come up. We're going to feel triggered. When they do, and we're in a place where we need to kind of control that emotional response, then how am I going to handle that? And then it might be talking to that person later, or it might just be you exploring why that was a trigger and you doing some self-work so it's not such a heavy emotional burden when they do happen. And then, of course, emotional expression is a good way to keep your emotional boundaries in check. I love emotions. I think they're fantastic. I think they teach us a lot about ourselves. I just don't think we need to express every single emotion to its max capacity all the time. I think that there's a way to have a feeling, acknowledge it, what's it saying, and then address it at the appropriate time. It doesn't have to be over the top all the time. But with that being said, we don't need to push our emotions aside either. They are there most of the time to let us know something or to have a message for us or whatever the case is. But it's what we do with that emotional expression that can lead to good, strong emotional boundaries, which will again lessen burnout. Last one is social boundaries. Boy, these got hit hard this year. My goodness. Social boundaries are what I do and don't want to do around people, what I feel comfortable doing with other people, or what I feel comfortable doing in my community, what I feel comfortable doing in society. It's just basic social interaction. You get to decide. And beyond just being an extrovert or an introvert, it's do I prefer to do things online? Do I prefer to do things in person? And believe it or not, I had that in this well before COVID even hit. So I was talking about online versus in person well before anything, because I think it's important to acknowledge that some of us do like doing things individually. I think some of us like to do things in a group, and not one is better or worse than the other one. They're just different. Each of them offer their own bonuses. Each of them has their own positive parts. Each of them has their own consequences. And it's just you deciding what that looks like for you, and then letting other people know, hey, I can go to this family function, but I can only tolerate it for about 2 hours. It has nothing to do with my love for you, has nothing to do with anything. It's just, I start to get very worn out after 6 hours of being around more than 6 people. Who knows what it is? That's for you to discover. And then to set that boundary with other people. And that can be with family interactions, it can be with friends interactions, it can be with coworkers. Say that there's a group of coworkers that are always enjoying Wednesday lunches, and you might feel left out. But if you also know that that's something that is not good for you socially, that it ends up draining you and you can't work the rest of the day, then it's okay to not be a part of that. So the biggest thing I have about social boundaries is thinking about how can you belong while being consistent with what your needs are. My needs are to feel I belong, but I don't want to do things hands-on. My need is to feel I belong in a community, but I like to be in the thick of it. So it's really you discovering what works best for you, and then applying those boundaries and letting other people know that those boundaries exist is how our social boundaries work. And this is the last slide, and I circle back to just general self-care. And the main things, I know that these are simple, or they sound simple. I know these are things, I did not invent the wheel on this. These are all things we've talked about before, but I know that they're hard to implement. And so that's why, like I said, I usually get the question of where should I start? What do I do? And don't start in your comfort zone, but don't start somewhere so far off in left field, it's not going to work for you. But self-care in general does include sleep, eating balanced, whatever that balanced is for you, praying, meditating, any kind of quiet time, group or individual hobbies. If your hobby is getting together with a bunch of other people, power to you, with your masks on, for now. If your hobby is doing something individual, knitting, something like that, whatever fills your cup. Please be aware of your morning, daytime, and evening routines and how important those are to self-care. That morning routine signifies I'm waking up, I'm getting ready for my day. The daytime routine signifies I'm a person existing in this world, I'm doing the best I can. And the evening routine is my day is over, I'm getting ready for sleep. I can put a close to the end of this day. Surrounding yourself with a positive support system, I think, is one of the best things anyone can do. And that literally is just finding your people. And whether that's, here's where, again, I kind of deviate from my social media tirade that I go on. But if you find a support system through social media, that's great. And a support system isn't like, oh, we've all been through the same thing. A social support system can just be, oh, you like that? Oh, I like that too. Let's get to know each other kind of thing. We don't put enough emphasis on friendships into adulthood as we do in early, but they're just as important. And some people's support system is their family, and some people's support system are coworkers, and some people's support system are friendships outside of work. It's really what you're comfortable with. It goes back to that boundary. Moving your body as much as you can in a meaningful way. It helps metabolize those stress chemicals first and foremost. If you want to get rid of those stress chemicals in your body, a way to metabolize them very quickly is to move your body. It'll burn them right off. I kind of think of like a candle burning, and the wick is really big if you're on a treadmill or on an indoor bike or something, and the wick is really small if you're more sedentary. So you'll eventually burn through it, but there's ways to speed that up. And limiting your social media, or just limiting the things that you're putting in your through your eyes and through your ears, what's getting in, because what's getting in does have an impact on your emotional state, which can then have an impact on your physical state. How is that for time? Oh, that was almost perfect, wasn't it, John? I love it. Again, my name is Bridget, and my email is bridget@lincolnwellnessgroup.com if you want to reach out to me. And if there are any questions, I'd love to answer them. I know this has been slotted for about an hour and a half. I was trying to keep the slideshow to about an hour and allow for any questions that anyone might have.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Bridget. I think you did such a good job. There's just not a lot of questions, but I definitely was paying attention and making some notes. I got to, when you talked about when hobbies or interests could become negative, and one of the things that made me think of is so during this pandemic, I've decided to start playing my guitar again, and there's a Facebook group where people are challenged to put music on there, and it's fun, but there's a point where you practice a song so much that it isn't fun anymore, and you try to post it and record it, and then it ends up losing that kind of magic. So anyway, that reflection I thought that was good.
Yeah,
putting
I think
together
we can even get burnout on our hobbies. I mean, burnout isn't just for work. This is more about work and life in general. But when you find that your hobby becomes your chore, it's not a hobby anymore. It's not fun. And then it becomes stressful, which gets us back in that stress loop, and it doesn't become relieving. And that relief is what we're seeking.
Yeah. The other thing I was going to ask, do you have any tips to help people kind of turn their brains off to help them sleep? I know you mentioned, don't have the tablet in front of you.
Put your phone down.
Yeah.
Yeah, actually I do. So the research is really, it's oversimplified, but it's also really clear that a nighttime routine is really the best way to increase your sleep. And again, some of the research says, well, it all says, if you can give yourself more time at the beginning or the end of your sleep cycle, most people can't do it at the end of their sleep cycle, which would be morning time. So I'm encouraging people to do it more at nighttime. And that's an evening routine that starts at the exact same time. That's the exact, with flexibility, of course. But the more you do in your routine, your brain goes, oh, this is sleepy time. I'm getting ready for bed. And then when you actually enter into your bed, it's going to know what comes next, because our brains are always seeking what's next. And oh my gosh, our brains love patterns. So if you set this pattern of this is what I do every night, then your brain's going to pick up on it pretty quickly. Just a few repetitions of it is probably going to work. Other people have rules for their bedroom, like no TVs, no pets, whatever works for you. I'm not one to just kind of blanket say, don't do any of that. It's your bedroom. You can do what you like in it. Just know that certain things are going to cause you to have less sleep. What's interrupting your sleep? So your nighttime routine might be as simple as starting at, I'm an early to bed person. So my routine starts at 9:30. So whether I'm going to have hot tea or just relax, I'm not doing anything. I'm not on my phone. I'm probably just spacing out in front of the TV, washing my face, brushing my teeth, getting into bed. And if that takes about a half an hour or so, then my brain knows when I start doing that, I'm signaling to go to bed.
Very good. All right,
Yeah.
thanks. I actually,
Melatonin.
I noticed some comments and questions are coming in. So someone asked to repeat your email address again. We did put it in the chat.
Sure. It's my first name, Bridget at Lincoln Wellness Group.com.
Okay. Loved it all. Such useful information. Thank you.
Oh, I'm glad you like.
Here's something. Healthy ways to cope about lack of hugs.
Oh, whoever said that, I am feeling you. You and I'll get together. We'll mask up and we'll hug. That's my solution. No, physical touch is so important actually to human beings in general. That's why if we don't have human people in our lives, we have pets. Like there's a reason that we crave other things in our life because it's actually really important. It releases a lot of our feel-good chemicals, a lot of dopamines, a lot of serotonin, a lot of oxytocin, all the good stuff. So my advice would be to you is other ways that you can either get touch, which if there's not a person that you live with, and if you don't have a pet or something like that, then finding other things that would help release those dopamines in your own body and the serotonins and all of that, which might be a different kind of hobby. If you like physical touch, you probably also like giving. So perhaps maybe those random acts of kindness or acts of kindness might be not as fulfilling, but somewhat fulfilling for you. It's perhaps finding safe people to meet up and have a little hug date. And by safe, I mean that they would, mask up, or if you're in isolation, then that's a really tough one. You're going to have to find an alternate way to release those feel-good hormones or chemicals until we can all hug again.
Yeah. Yep. And I think another question about coping with social distancing, I think you just covered that. Just, a lot of positive feedback, very rewarding to watch. So that's always good to hear. Thank you for an amazing presentation. Let's see. What about kids specifically and increased anxiety challenges with COVID disrupting the kids' social interactions?
My goodness, I've never seen in private practice so many teens and young adults and even younger. And I just by practice don't see anyone 13 and younger, but I know my colleagues that see that age are swamped as well. It's a new phenomenon. It's real. The anxiety that our young adults, teens, and children are facing is like nothing I've ever seen, to be quite honest. And my colleagues and I are constantly, almost weekly, talking about how to deal with it. And I think having open conversations about their fears and anxieties, kind of pinpointing what it is. Some of the children or young adults and teens and kids can pinpoint, I feel so alone when I'm doing Zoom. I feel so alone all these times. So it's figuring out a way that they can have some sort of social interaction, again, safely. And if they can't, then finding things that they can do, alternative things, whether it's, going out to parks and going for car rides and kind of going back to the basics of, well, we can't do that right now, but what can we do? And it's definitely having to get creative with our social interactions. There's some games that a lot of kids play through their phone with friends, and it's more screen time. But I asked the pediatrician last time I was there a couple months ago, and he said that there's really no solid evidence or research that supports or negates that screen time is negatively impacting children or positively enhancing them. So that made me feel kind of good that he's like, I'm reading the research and there's nothing you're not ruining your kids by putting them in front of a TV screen, which I kind of always thought I was. Uh, so, just trying to get creative with it, or finding a friend that they can safely be around or talk to, or it's a real thing. It's tough.
Okay. Thank you. Let's see here. I needed a reminder on all of this today, so that's good to hear that. Here we go. I'd like to know more about how physical activity best metabolizes stress. Any more to add to that?
Oh, I could add a whole other hour on that. So what happens is those chemical compounds are in our body, and when we fire up our natural like when we actually have our muscles moving, our muscles use those chemicals for energy. And so it literally burns them off as if it was a sandwich in your stomach. So imagine then, imagine you've had a stressful event happen. That's like eating a sandwich. But it's what's happening in today's world is we're eating a sandwich, we're eating 14 sandwiches. And we're not having enough time in between to properly burn them off. So they're kind of sitting inside of us, kind of clogging up our system, so to speak. So by actually doing physical activity, like I said, it fires up our actual muscles. It makes our heart beat faster. It makes our lungs work harder. It makes our big muscle groups work. And it literally uses those chemicals, gets them right out.
Okay.
I could say a lot more about that, but that was like my condensed version.
Yeah. One of the things, let me make sure. One of the things I had written down was, so Bridget and I used to work together, and I remember you talking about email prioritizing, like maybe only reading your emails certain times of day, so you're not just constantly feel like you have to address them as soon as they arrive.
Yes. Do you want me to talk more about that?
Sure, if you've got any guidance, because I don't know about you, but it feels like emails picked up this year. I think because so many people are virtual. Yeah, emails seem to be twice, maybe 3 times what they used to be.
I agree with that observation, because and I think it's probably a fact, because most people went virtual, and instead of walking down to an office, which we used to be able to do, I'm now having to send this person an email, or I'll ask them that next time I see them, and we're not having those meetings anymore. And so I think it's probably a real thing. And I will say this, in full disclosure, my ADD brain works differently than some brains, but this is what works for me and might work for other people. I'm encouraging people, if you can, if you have the ability to, if your supervisor is on board with this, shut off your notifications. Notifications are the bane of my existence at this point, because if I'm focused on something, and the moment I'm focused on this email, then another one pops up, I know it's there. Even if I don't check it, at the back of my brain, I can't focus on this email because I know that there's another one waiting for me. And let's say you have those quite terrible alerts that pop up at the bottom of your screen and show you what the beginning of the email is. So you're working away, you're focused, and then you see that pop up. Where does your brain go? Boop. It's the same pattern switch or thought switch that your brain has to have if you're driving and texting. It's very dangerous, but thank goodness we're just sitting at our desks. So if you can, absolutely shut off your notifications, so that way you can finish one thing at a time. Then the other thing is, have a system for your emails. Either consistently I prefer to do emails from oldest to newest, because what I find is if you start at the top, which would be the newest, by the time you get down to the bottom, it's been resolved. But so if you go from oldest to newest, then as you're writing down your little list of things that go with it, then you're able to catch them before sending any other new emails out. That John kind of alluded to this. Another thing that worked for me and might work for other people is I would send out my out of office reply and do 2-hour chunks and say, I'm not answering new emails at this time. I will answer your email in 2 hours. But what I would do in that 2 hours is go through all my old emails and get them organized and get them off. So it's finding a system that works for you. Closed doors, do not disturb, something that allows you complete focus to get them done. And it's also reading the whole thread. John, I'm going to not throw you under the bus, but I'm going to share a little secret that John and I know have, which is we're skimmers. We like to skim. And I've learned with COVID, you can't skim emails anymore. You have to read the whole thing. Sorry, I hope you didn't mind I did that.
No, that's okay. I am a skimmer.
I'm a skimmer too. We belong to Skimmers United. We'll make it a social group. Everyone's welcome. But it's also making or knowing what works for you and what doesn't, and knowing if you are a skimmer, then you have to read the whole email, which again takes focus and time, and distraction is the enemy. So I hope that was helpful for someone.
Yeah, I think so. We cleared the questions out, and
Great.
like I said, there was a lot of great feedback. So I think I'll go ahead and go through the outro. There's just a few bits of information I want to share, and I'm just doing another check to make sure I don't miss anything. Sometimes there'll be a question right at the end. So that does finish up our questions. Thank you all for attending, and a special thank you to Bridget. Remember, all of our webinars are recorded and available on our website at NIFA.org under Community Development, Training, and Webinars. Or you can go to our YouTube channel and search NIFA Housing. Tomorrow, actually, we have a special edition. Tomorrow, Thursday, December 17th, we have a special edition to celebrate our annual Affordable Housing Award winners. So definitely check that out. We used to do that at our conference every year, and we're saving, the best for last. This will be our final webinar for 2020. And then also, please continue to stay tuned as we enter the new year for NIFA's upcoming Webinar Wednesdays. We're already starting to get those scheduled, and you'll get a survey at the end of this. Please put your input in there if you have any ideas for upcoming webinars. And I got a big thank you from a friend of ours saying great presentation. I love seeing you both. I actually got a text, Bridget, from another friend of yours saying great job. So I think that was great. Thank you so much, and thanks everyone for watching, and have a great day.
Bye everyone, have a good one.